Bike skills. Who wouldn't be better off with more skill on the bike and more confidence on the trail? I've come out to this very deceptively flat piece of ground to learn the real basics of bike skills and bike handling. I can't do that without my good friend Harry, so Harry, come on in please. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you again, Doug.
So, bike skills. What are we going to look at today?
Basically, bike skills 101. Start from the very beginning on why do you ride a bike, or what do you want to get out of your riding experience. So tell me, what is it that you want to do?
Well, I'm an old man in Lycra, and I'm a weekend warrior, I suppose. I don't shred anything, I don't pin, I don't even know what those words mean. I like riding my bike. I like single track, I like technical stuff myself personally. I like a challenge either uphill or downhill. I would say I'm quite confident, but I'm not a fast rider. I think with age I see more dangers than the younger guys, and so I'm always taking speed off before. I'm not going too fast.
I mean, the foundation principle is to figure out what exactly you want to do, and it seems like you don't want to do big air or very technical riding. You don't want to do sort of cross-country racing either, which is where you need a very fast, nimble bike. You want something in between, which is what most people want anyway. It's an all-round experience with a bit of competitiveness, but not all-out racing in the fast endurance type or the extreme downhill type. You want to be somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, let's say.
So where do we start?
Right, so let's have a look at your bike. It's 100 millimeters of suspension travel, front and back, which is more of a cross-country marathon type of bike. It's probably not ideal for what you want to do. You'll see you don't have a dropper seat post, which means it's not oriented for going downhill faster, because to go downhill with confidence and speed, you want the seat out of your way so you can move around over the bike and the seat doesn't hit you in the arse whenever you go over a jump or a bump or something. So just to compare our two bikes and to point out the differences in the experience that these bikes give you, this bike has got a slightly slacker geometry, so the front fork is at a slightly slacker angle. The slacker the fork angle, the more capable it is downhill, because it lengthens the wheelbase and it gives you more confidence going down technical terrain. Nice big volume tires with nice knobs, nice soft rubber to grip. Gives you a lot of confidence, especially on the front wheel. On the rear wheel, you can get away with slightly less tread and a slightly skinnier tire, but bigger tires are always better. And it's got 130 millimeters of suspension travel versus 100 mils. So it's got more give in the front, and also at the back it's got 120 mils versus 100 on your bike. So generally, a bike with about 120 mils of travel front and back, or 130, 120, with a slightly slacker than race geometry, and a dropper seat post. That's pretty much all you need for any type of mountain biking. The fundamental of any bike, any full suspension bike, is suspension settings. You can have the best, fanciest, latest bike with the highest end suspension, but if it's not set correctly for your weight and riding style, it's useless, and it can actually be dangerous too. So it's very important to get the suspension set up properly. So when you purchase a bike, or even if you haven't purchased it, you can build a relationship with your local bike shop and ask them about their advice on suspension settings. Maybe go for a bike setup and a suspension setup. Your suspension must be set up so that it damps vibrations and it doesn't bounce you off obstacles when it gets an impact. It must absorb and damp the vibrations and the impacts. So you can set the rebound speed, the speed that the suspension comes back at you, and that shouldn't be too fast, because if it's coming back at you fast, then you're not damping the vibrations. It's just pogo sticking. And the same at the back. You don't want the rear end to pop back after it's been compressed. And that might shoot you forward over the handlebars. So it's very important to set the rebound on the rear especially to slightly slower than the front, so that the back is rebounding slightly slow. When you're going downhill, the front end stays up and the back doesn't kick you forward. So once you've got your suspension set up, suited to your weight and riding style, and it's got a base setting which is safe and controlled, then you've got to look at your cockpit. Are you comfortable and in control of the bike? Critical things about the cockpit are lever reach and lever position. So the lever should be in a position where your finger is in a relaxed state in the notch of the brake lever to give you most power when braking, and you don't want to be reaching too far. You don't want the lever to be out there where you're reaching for it. So when you're going down the trail, you don't have to be tense and reaching with your fingers. If that's the case, you're going to be unfocused on what's ahead of you on the trail. You're not going to be relaxed, and you're not going to have full control over the bike. If they're close enough where you can be in a comfortable, relaxed position, and you can pull them and they're not pulling too far and they're not touching your other fingers or touching the bar, so they've got a short throw and they're set nice and close, then that's perfect. So most brakes have a lever reach adjust, but you've got to adjust them with these little adjust knobs. Some of the brakes have a tool adjust there, but you've got to be in a good, comfortable position where you can brake safely, confidently. Brakes are safety. People say the faster you go, the less you brake, but it's actually not true. The faster you go, you want to have better brakes, and because you're braking at the right time, and you need to be confident. When you need to know exactly how your brakes are going to react, and that they're going to be there for you every time. If you're really starting out and you're still getting used to which is front and which is rear, and you might panic in the trail, then yeah, generally stay off the front brake. But the first thing is to figure out which is your back and front brake, and a good way to do that is to go right along and do some skids on a gravel road and pull the back brake and skid the back wheel out, forgetting about the front brake, and just sort of get comfortable pulling the back brake and seeing where you break traction with the wheel. And then you can slowly introduce the front brake together with the back brake and start to feel the bike slowing down more quickly, because you need the front brake in mountain biking, because without traction there's no braking, and when you're going downhill your weight is forward biased. So your weight is on the front wheel, and that's where your braking will happen, on your front wheel. Also on your back wheel, but if your back wheel loses traction, there's no braking there. So that's why you need the front wheel to slow you down when your back wheel's lost traction. So it's important to use both brakes together and to gain a sensitivity on where your brakes lock the wheels, on which surface. So you don't really want to lock your wheels unless you're trying to do that on purpose. So generally you're pulling the back brake slightly harder than the front brake, but your front brake is very important when you're going downhill. So another thing that's quite common on bikes when they come out of the box, the rear shifter is too close to the hand of the rider. So there's often a setting, an adjustment where you can move the shifter in and out. The shifter must be in a position where you can reach them, but it mustn't be aggravating you. It mustn't be like that, where it's touching you, causing you discomfort when you're riding. That's good. So the angle of the brakes is a personal preference, but generally you don't want them too far down that your wrists are having to bend over, or too high up that you're having to cock your wrists too much.
So how am I doing here?
Okay, so put your hands on the bars. Okay, relax your fingers. All right, so that's fine. You might be a little bit stretched out on your fingers. You maybe want the levers about there, so that your fingers can be relaxed and then be pulling the levers in a relaxed state. Mm-hmm. Also, you want the brake to be set so that your finger is on the nook of that brake lever.
Okay.
That's where you get your most power. You don't want the brake to be all the way out so that you're pulling there. Mm-hmm. So your brakes are set up pretty well at this stage. I would maybe try and move the levers in slightly by turning that bolt over there. There's another aspect of the brake. The one is the lever reach, and the other aspect is how far it takes to actually lock up. That's the throw, the lever throw. So you've got to make sure if you bring your lever reach in, that it's not throwing too far that it hits your other knuckle.
Gotcha. And
that can be set up by the bike shop too. When you're braking a lot on a long descent, your hands start getting tired. The closer your fingers are to the bar when you're braking, the more power you have. If you're braking with your finger all the way out there, you're putting a lot of strain on this part of your hand. So you can get more hand fatigue when the levers are far out like that, versus when they're here. Okay, so if I relax my hand on this, these levers are too far from me because my finger is resting on top of the brake. For me to grip that brake, I have to do that, and that's not ideal. The lever should be there, and then that should be my relaxed position, and then I can brake from there.
So Harry, thanks. That's a lot of basic information around the setup, but what's the most fundamental thing to learn when you're actually riding the bike?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you've got your bike set up, suspension, cockpit, it's the right bike for you, ready to go on the trail, you've got to be balanced on your bike. You can't be nervous and doing the wrong thing with your body. You've got to be leaning slightly more forward biased, centered over the bike, to have control over the front wheel, and that'll give you confidence.